The glass ceiling I had been working at Brightwell Consulting, a mid-sized strategy firm in Chicago, for nearly 6 years. I started as a junior analyst fresh out of grad school, hungry to prove myself. Over time, I climbed the ranks, senior analyst, then project manager. I led some of our most successful campaigns, brought in high-profile clients, and mentored new hires. I wasn't flashy, but I was consistent, reliable, strategic. My boss, Greg, was the director of strategy. He was the kind of leader who thrived on charisma and optics. He knew how to work a room, charm clients, and take credit for wins. He wasn't incompetent, just deeply political. And he had a knack for keeping people like me in the background. I'd applied for the associate director role twice. Both times I was passed over. The second time, I asked Greg directly what was holding me back. He leaned back in his chair, gave me that patronizing half smile, and said, "You're great at execution, but you're not leadership material. You don't command attention." I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. I'd led multi-million-dollar projects, handled crises, and built trust across departments. But apparently, I didn't command attention. I left his office that day feeling humiliated, but also determined. The setup. A few months later, Greg announced he'd be taking a 3-week vacation to Italy. His wife had landed a sabbatical, and they were going to unplug and recharge. Before leaving, he appointed Tasha, a relatively new hire, as interim lead. Tasha was smart but inexperienced. She'd only been with us for 8 months and had never led a full project. Greg said he wanted to give her a chance to grow. I was told to support her as needed. Translation, do the work, but don't take credit. I didn't argue, I just watched. Within the first week, things started unraveling. Tasha missed a key client deadline. She forgot to schedule a stakeholder review. She panicked during a budget negotiation and deferred to me in front of the client. I stepped in quietly. I restructured the timeline, handled the client calls, and coached the team through the chaos. I didn't ask for permission. I just did what needed to be done. By the end of week 2, I was effectively running the department. The reckoning. Rachel responded within hours. She asked me to present my findings to the executive team the following Monday. I walked into that meeting with a quiet confidence. I laid out the challenges, the solutions, and the results. I didn't throw Tasha under the bus. I simply showed what had happened and how I'd responded. After the presentation, Rachel said, "This is the kind of leadership we need. Not just presence, but impact." Greg returned from vacation the next day. He walked into a meeting he wasn't invited to. I was at the head of the table, reviewing quarterly strategy. Rachel was beside me. Later that afternoon, Greg was called into HR. He was informed that he'd be transitioning to a client advisory role, no longer overseeing internal strategy. I was promoted to director of strategy. Greg didn't speak to me again. The aftermath. I didn't celebrate publicly. I didn't post on LinkedIn or throw shade. I just got to work. I restructured the team, implemented new training protocols, and created a mentorship program for junior staff. I made sure people like me, quiet, competent, overlooked, had a path to leadership. Tasha stayed on. She apologized privately, said she'd been overwhelmed and insecure. I accepted her apology, but I never forgot the call. A few months later, Rachel pulled me aside and said, "You didn't just take his job. You earned it while he wasn't looking." The betrayal. One afternoon, I overheard Tasha on a Zoom call with Greg. She didn't know I was in the office. "Honestly, I think Maya's trying to take over," she said. "She's making decisions without me and acting like she's in charge." Greg replied, "Keep her in check. She's ambitious, but she doesn't have the leadership edge. Just make sure she doesn't overstep." I felt sick. I had saved Tasha and Greg from a complete meltdown. I had protected client relationships, salvaged deliverables, and kept morale afloat. And yet, I was being painted as a threat. That night, I went home and opened a blank document. I started writing. I documented everything: missed deadlines, client complaints, my interventions, the outcomes. I included emails, meeting notes, and performance metrics. I built a case, not just for myself, but for the department's future. Then I sent it to Rachel, our VP of Strategy. I didn't ask for a promotion. I just said, I know I wasn't considered leadership material, but I've been leading this team for the past 2 weeks. Here's the proof. Reflection. Looking back, I realize Greg wasn't wrong, not entirely. I didn't command attention in the traditional sense. I wasn't loud, flashy, or political. But I led with clarity, empathy, and results. I didn't need a spotlight. I needed a chance. Leadership isn't about charisma, it's about courage. The courage to act when others hesitate, the courage to speak when others stay silent, the courage to lead even when you're told you can't. And sometimes the best way to prove your leadership material is to lead. The ripple effect. The promotion changed everything and nothing. I had the title now, the authority, the seat at the table. But the culture Greg had cultivated didn't vanish overnight. Some colleagues congratulated me with genuine warmth. Others offered tight smiles and avoided eye contact. I didn't flinch. I focused on the work. One afternoon, Jordan, a junior analyst, messaged me the resistance. Not everyone welcomed the change. A few senior managers, Greg's old allies, began pushing back. They questioned my decisions, challenged my authority, and tried to reroute projects behind my back. I didn't retaliate. I invited them to strategy reviews, asked for their input, and made their resistance visible. Eventually, they stopped trying to undermine me, not because they liked me, but because they realized I wasn't going anywhere. The rebuild. I launched a department-wide audit. We reviewed every process, every client touchpoint, every internal workflow. The results were sobering. 40% of our time was spent on redundant reporting. Client satisfaction had plateaued. Junior staff felt siloed and unsupported. I built a new model, leaner, smarter, collaborative. It wasn't flashy, but it worked. The mentor Jordan wasn't the only one watching. Soon, other junior staff began reaching out. I started hosting monthly leadership roundtables, open forums where anyone could ask questions, pitch ideas, or share frustrations. One day, a young strategist named Priya said, "The Spotlight Rachel nominated me for a regional leadership award. I hesitated. I didn't like the spotlight. But she said, visibility isn't vanity. It's influence I accepted." At the ceremony, I spoke about quiet leadership, about how impact isn't always loud. The room was silent, listening, and for the first time I felt seen. The echo Greg's departure had left a vacuum. Some clients were nervous. I met with each one personally. I didn't promise perfection, I promised partnership. One client said, "You're not what we expected. You're better." That stuck with me. Sometimes the best echoes come from the people you serve. The test. A major client threatened to pull out. They'd had a bad experience under Greg's tenure and were skeptical of our new direction. I flew to New York, met with their board, and presented a recovery plan. No spin, no excuses, just solutions. They stayed and expanded their contract. That win wasn't just strategic, it was personal. The Mirror one evening, I stayed late reviewing performance reports. I caught my reflection in the glass wall. Same Maya, but different. I wasn't chasing approval anymore. I was building something. And I realized Greg had been a mirror, not of who I was, but of who I refused to become. The invitation. A university invited me to speak to their MBA cohort. Topic: redefining leadership. I walked into the lecture hall and saw rows of eager faces. I told them, the crossroads. Rachel announced she'd be retiring. The VP role would open. People started speculating. Would I apply? I wasn't sure I loved strategy. I loved building, but I also knew if I didn't step up, someone else would. Someone who might not protect what we'd built. I started drafting my vision statement, the vote. The executive board interviewed 3 candidates. I was the youngest, the quietest, but I was also the only one with a transformation track record. After the final round, Rachel pulled me aside. She said, "You didn't just answer their questions, you changed them." A week later, I got the call. I was the new VP of strategy. The legacy: I didn't redecorate Rachel's office. I kept her framed quote on the wall. The letter one morning, I received a handwritten note, no return address, just one line. The future. I stood at the annual company summit, looking out at 300 faces, some new, some familiar, all part of the journey. I said, "The trigger, a forgotten email thread, reveals a conspiracy. Her promotion was sabotaged by a cabal of executives. She prints it, folds it, and places it beneath the cracked clock in her apartment. Time is now her weapon, the red thread." She begins wearing a red thread around her wrist, a silent vow. Every time she's gaslit, undermined, or ignored, she twists it tighter. It becomes her ritual, her tether to purpose. The janitor's ledger. Late nights in the office reveal allies in the shadows. The janitor, once mocked, has kept a ledger of unethical behavior. Agatha copies it. The first seeds of disruption are sown. The moth in the boardroom. During a tense meeting, a moth flutters across the projector screen. Agatha watches it struggle, trapped in artificial light. She smiles. Even fragile things can disrupt the machine. The whisper network. She revives the forgotten voices, interns, assistants, scapegoats. Together they form a whisper network. Anonymous tips begin leaking to human resources, legal and external auditors. The audit, a random compliance check, rocks the company. Agatha's fingerprints are nowhere, but her influence is everywhere. Executives scramble. She remains calm, the gaslight reversal. She begins quoting her abusers back to them, word for word, in meetings, in emails. Their own cruelty becomes their undoing. They flinch, she doesn't. The rebranding. She redesigns a failing department's pitch deck overnight. It wins a major client. Leadership takes credit. She lets them, for now. The interns rise. An intern she mentored is promoted. Quietly, they begin redirecting resources to Agatha's initiatives. The hierarchy starts to bend. The surveillance room. She discovers a hidden camera in the break room. She rewires it. Now it records the executives' private conversations. The footage becomes leverage. The Fracture AVP resigns after a leaked scandal. Agatha's whisper network celebrates in silence. 1 down, 5 to go. The clock strikes. She sends a calendar invite titled "Time's Up." No agenda, just a cracked clock image. The recipients, her former tormentors, don't sleep that night. The boardroom coup. She orchestrates a hostile takeover of a key department. The new leader, her intern, the old guard, speechless. The mirror test. She stares into a mirror. Am I becoming them? The moth lands on her shoulder. She doesn't swat it away. The redacted report. She rewrites a quarterly report exposing financial manipulation. It's anonymous, but the formatting, her signature. The reckoning. She confronts the executive who called her not leadership material. In private, she plays the footage. He cries. She doesn't. The exit interview, another resignation, this time the CEO. Agatha's name is never mentioned, but everyone knows. The promotion. She's offered a VP role. She declines. I don't want a title. I want control. The rebirth. She redesigns the company's onboarding process. It's trauma-informed, inclusive, and radically transparent. The culture begins to shift. The ghost file. She deletes her old employee file, the one filled with false evaluations. In its place, she uploads a manifesto, how to dismantle a toxic system. The moth emerges. She wears a moth-shaped brooch to the annual gala. Everyone notices. No one dares ask. The final thread. She unties the red thread, places it on her desk. Her vow is fulfilled. But the war isn't over. The new hierarchy. She builds a new leadership model, fluid, decentralized, built on trust. It terrifies the old guard. It empowers the forgotten. The caretaker's legacy. She's no longer just Agatha. She's the caretaker, the one who watches, protects, and disrupts. Her story becomes myth. The silence after she walks through the office. No one speaks, not out of fear, but reverence. The cracked clock ticks once, then stops.